and welcome to the first half of the August vlog. If you know me in real life, then you'll know that I really like matcha, and I somewhat perfected my own matcha latte recipe. Recently, or I should say a couple of months ago, I came across a matcha tiramisu recipe online, and it's fairly easy, no baking involved, and essentially what you do is you take some ladyfingers, Biscotten in German, and then you just basically dip them in. So I was using 3 teaspoons of matcha powder and 200 milliliters of boiling water, and as you can see here, I just dip in these ladyfingers. If you're curious about the creamy white yellowish substance you can see on the left hand side, that was really easy as well. And all I had to do was use 2 eggs, but the egg yolks and the egg whites separately. So I separated the egg yolks from the whites, and I put the yolks in a large bowl and just put them aside for now. And then I whisked the egg whites, I added some sugar, then I added the mascarpone to the egg yolks, and at the end I just combined it all, mixed again, and then I was pretty much done. After I put the ladyfingers that I dipped the matcha earlier inside this container, I just had to pour the creamy white-yellow mixture on top of it. And then I had a layer of ladyfingers and then a layer of the cream, ladyfingers again, cream, ladyfingers, cream, and so on. So that's basically what you can see me doing here. And then, as you can see, I took out a couple more ladyfingers from the package. And what I'm not showing you here is that I just kept doing what I've done previously. So put them in the matcha powder, in the container, add cream, and so on. But then, as you can see, it was getting really messy, so I just cleaned the surface a little bit. In case you're curious, this is the matcha powder that I regularly buy, and a couple of minutes later, this was the final result. You're meant to put it in the fridge for a little bit and just let it rest. Fast forward a couple of hours, it was probably 5 p.m. and I had a cup of tea and tasted my matcha tiramisu. It was really good. Here I'm also showing you my current read at the time. Of course, we can't have a vlog without a couple of cameos from my cat Lily. After I spent some time outside and had a cup of tea, I was sitting down at my desk and just doing some tasks. So I'm filming this on August 1st, and I wanted to talk to you about this book that I finished yesterday. And it's called Sleep by Anna Jones. Pretty sure this is her debut, so the first novel she's written. And I'm just gonna read you the blurb really quickly. So it says, every parent exists inside of 2 families simultaneously, the one they were born into and the one they have made. The surface of Margaret's childhood is one of sunlit swimming pools and Saturday morning pancakes. until late one summer she wakes to a new kind of peril. 25 years later, as the past encroaches on the present, Margaret reckons with the questions of how much of our lives are our own and what it takes to keep a child safe. So that's the blurb, and it's a relatively short book. It just has, I think it was 260 pages. And I gave this one, well, I haven't made up my mind yet, but I think either 2.5 or 3 stars, because I can see the appeal and it's an interesting novel for sure. But I also think I probably wasn't the target group for this one, because it's very much about the cycles of motherhood and childhood. And you know, as I said before, as I read out loud, 2 families simultaneously, the one they were born into and the one they have made. And I know nothing about motherhood. So, you know, just reading about Margaret and how she grew up, and, you know, we read about her family members, her brother, how she doesn't get along with her mum. And then fast forward 25 years later, she has 2 kids of her own. She's divorced. She has a new boyfriend. And I just feel like I can't really relate to all of this, because that's not something I've experienced myself, if that makes sense. So I feel like there's definitely a target group for this novel out there, but it's not me, if that makes sense. So that's why I gave it 2.5/3 stars, because I couldn't really see myself in any of what's happening in this novel. So, yeah, but if you feel like this could be something for you, then check out Sleep by Yana Jones. And because I realized you could only see about half the cover or even just a quarter of the cover in my previous clip, I'm going to show it to you again now. So this is Sleep by Yana Jones. Let's turn it around. And if you would like to take a look at the blurb, you can by all means just pause the video and read it in your own time. But as I said, this is a pretty short book, just 260 pages. It wasn't unenjoyable or anything like that, but I just feel like there's people out there who could enjoy this book a lot more than I did. And at times, I have to say, I also found it a bit difficult to read, and I will put some trigger warnings on the screen so you can get a sense of why that was the case. So, as some of you may know, I work as a campaign manager for Tandem Collective, and part of my job is to read books in preparation for our read-alongs. So what I do is I read the book, I annotate a little bit, I highlight interesting, relevant quotes, I think of discussion questions, I try and come up with creative challenges that could be fun for our read-along participants. And the book that I will be reading next is Unsere Tage am Fluss by Karin Lindberg, and it's historical fiction. It takes place both in Germany and in England, and I think it has 2 separate timelines, which usually is something that I quite like. So I am curious about this one, and let's start reading. Usually these aren't books that are officially out yet, so I don't receive a paperback or anything like that. I just get the manuscript as an EPUB or a PDF. I send them over to my iPad, and that's why you can see me reading an ebook copy. A couple of days later, I got to spend some time in the countryside. There's a barn and a beautiful fairy tale garden, which I'll show you in a second. The reason why I came here on that day was just to check up on things, but also to pick some fruit, including apples and a type of plum-like fruit that we call echtere in Austrian German. Here you can see me walking epically through the garden, pretending I'm in some kind of fairy tale. #main character energy. There were also some blackberries, but they weren't ripe yet, so we couldn't pick them. Here you can see another main character moment, and I didn't have a tripod with me. So what I did is I just placed my phone against the container that we used to collect the fruit in, and the container was on an old well, which kind of felt like a Murakami novel. And here you can see everything we've picked that day. Some of my relatives were kind enough to invite me and my parents to a barbecue. But even though it was August, it was actually really cold and raining, so we had to make a fire. I've also been fortunate enough to receive a lot of exciting book mail in August. First up are the Bachman books that Stephen King has written as Richard Bachman, and I've seen this around a lot on Instagram, so I can't wait to dive in. The Long Walk's gonna be turned into a movie, so I need to read it before it comes out. Next up, there's a short story collection called Night Shift, which a good friend of mine has recommended to me, especially the stories, what was it called? The Lawnmower Man. So I'm gonna prioritize this one. I was gifted an amazing blogger box by Klett Cotta, and I especially like the pull here to enter the game. This box came with a couple of goodies, a floppy disk, a candle in really awesome colors, so as soon as it's colder I can't wait to use it. There was also a wee postcard with a note from the author on the back. Then I also got this little bag full of big secrets inside. What would you use it for? Let me know in the comments. And last but not least, there was also a notebook included, which said my list of vicious acts of revenge. And most importantly, here is the book in all its glory. It's called Die echtere Wirklichkeit by Viennese author Raphaela Edelbauer. I'm also going to show you the inside because take a look. It is signed. Here's a quick overview of the blogger box that I've gotten, and if you look closely you can also spot the note from the author.